Several years ago when my kids were younger, in fact, I think the oldest one was barely a teenager, we went to a family camp. And as a family, we were kind of scattered all over the place. At one point during the day, the kids had gone off to do their projects and fun events, and Mom and I just kind of stood on the fishing dock watching. And as we stood there on the fishing dock watching all the kids get out in their canoes to take off, it was pretty obvious how the kids had been divided up or had chosen to divide themselves up. And the one canoe was all the girls, the pretty primpy girls with their hair up, the ones that looked like they put makeup on the morning of the day of camp. And they had their hair fixed nicely. And in another canoe was all of the jocks, all the athletic guys. And, they had their shirts off. They didn't have their life jackets on. They were just ready to go. And then in the last canoe to leave the dock was what I would call the misfits. These were the ones that every one of them had their life jackets on with the strap up the middle. Every one of them was hanging onto the sides of the boat as they got in. And you could tell just by watching them. Nothing in life had to happen to them. These guys were going to turn that boat over before it ever got off the dock. They were clumsy. They were not ready. They were not prepared. They had no idea what they were doing, and they were terrified. All of those things kind of play together when life is coming at you. And if you're not prepared for what's coming next, it's going to turn you over. I mean, when you're already nervous before your boat leaves the dock, the first wind is going to frighten you. The first wave, another boat goes by, and you're done. Well, the girls took off and paddled their way across the lake. And as they got halfway across, the jocks, all of the star athletes in their studly selves, caught up with the girls by paddling so much faster. And they began a process of bumping into the girls and chasing the girls. And they would actually paddle fast enough to circle the girls and all kinds of just obnoxious behavior. And at one point, one gentleman decides, I use gentleman loosely, a teenage jock, stands up in his own canoe and he's got his feet on each side and he's kind of rocking the boat back and forth. And the other guys are just rocking with him because they're not even scared. If it turns over, they're all strong. They're all going to swim away, right? There's no fear in them. They couldn't care less if that boat gets turned over. But they were also very agile, very athletic, so they could rock that boat back and forth with no problem at all. And as they paddled closer to the girls, I began to see his intent becoming clear. They would get close enough to the girls' boat, and he would act like he was going to jump on it, and then he would wave it off. And then he would act like he was going to jump, and then he'd wave it off. Finally, they got the girls kind of pinned. They're in high weeds. They're not going anywhere. There's no place that they can go besides to get out on the other side of the lake, which is muddy and mucky, and they don't want to do that. They want to get back to the dock. And so the boys are kind of between them and the rest of the lake and have them pinned kind of against the side. Well, this young man has no life jacket on, and he stands up and kind of, like Tarzan, bangs on his chest, and he leaps toward their boat. Now, let me ask you this question. If that was you at this point in life, if you're in that girl's canoe, if you're in that canoe by yourself, and someone has made a conscious effort to rock your boat, maybe it's to tell lies about you on Facebook. Maybe it's to destroy relationships that you hold dear, to speak ill of you to your friends or your family, your loved ones. Maybe it's just a reputation campaign problem that you have, that maybe it's part of your own work and maybe it's part of someone else's. But if there's someone who has set out to rock your boat, someone who has intentionally gone about the business of turning you over, how do you react to that? What do you do? Well, the girls knew they couldn't out-paddle the guys. The girls knew they couldn't go much further from where they were because they were stuck against the shore and the high weeds on the other side. But as this young, athletic boy was in midair, about to jump in their canoe and turn it over, one of the girls looked at him, and instead of trying to paddle, she stuck the oar deep in the water as she could and found bottom. And using the physics of her boat on water against a firm foundation, she shoved off as hard as she could. Well, sure enough, what he thought was going to be a grab of the edge of the canoe and turning it over became an absolute belly flop in the nasty, muddy, shallow, weed-covered water. made a huge noise. All the guys in the boat busted up laughing, of course. All the girls are now laughing and paddling away as fast as they can before he can get up and grab the boat for real. See, there are ways to handle things like that. There's not a whole lot the girls could have done to outrun the guys if they were determined to turn them over. But the girls were in a little different condition than were the misfits, who were so clumsy and so ill-prepared and so unready for this event in life that they were going to turn themselves over. They didn't need anybody else to rock their boat. Their boat was already about to be rocked. So let me ask this question. If you knew before that day came, and I don't know that there's any way to have complete knowledge in advance, but if you knew that there was a chance that one day you would be in a canoe, and one day you would row out on a lake, and perhaps one day a teenage boy would try to turn your boat over, what are some things that you could do to be prepared for that moment? Well, perhaps you could get in a canoe before that day and spend some time rowing so that you can learn how to navigate and move with speed and agility. Perhaps, instead of putting on your makeup and worrying about how your hair looked, you might be more concerned with the depth of the lake and what else is in there, and what if I did fall out of my boat and how far would I have to swim? And maybe you just put a life jacket on. Or maybe you'll learn how to balance the weight of the boat, so if someone did jump on the side of it, you could offset him, and he still would just end up in the water. See, all of these are scenarios that I'm guessing those young girls didn't think about that morning when they got up and went out to the dock to get on the boat. But if you're a grown-up, that boat rocker might not look like a teenage boy who wants to jump on your boat. It might look like that speeding ticket that you didn't intend to get. It might look like that red light camera that you didn't think was there. Or that cop who was hiding behind the billboard on your way to work in a school zone while you're texting. Now see, it's easy to look at the cop and blame him, or blame the school zone, or blame the stupid laws that make it illegal to use your cell phone while driving in a school zone. You could blame all of those things, or you could simply turn your phone off while you're driving. I'm just saying. But see, sometimes our boat gets rocked by something like that. We get our phone taken away, or we get a big fine, or we get our car impounded. Or can you imagine how bad your day would be if you forgot to register your car, or forgot to inspect your car, or forgot to renew your insurance at the same time that you're texting while driving through a school zone? You're walking to work today, and for a while, because driving without insurance will get your car impounded. But you wouldn't have got pulled over if you hadn't been texting in a school zone. See, all of those things begin to conspire against you and create a disastrous day, or week, or month, or even more. Because if you can't get to work, then you probably can't pay the insurance bill. And if your car got impounded, your bill just doubled, and your insurance could go higher because of the ticket of driving without any insurance. And now what would have been a bill of a couple of $100 is a couple $1,000, and it snowballs really, really fast. That's not just in the area of auto insurance and life. It could be your job. It could be your education. It could be your relationships. There are so many areas in life that one tiny mistake that we make, one choice that we make, becomes an exponential snowball of ill effects. Cause and effect is a real thing, and it happens in our lives on a regular basis. It just needs one little catalyst to start the whole chain reaction. Just one. Just one. And when that happens, that chain reaction of small explosions can destroy your life. That one text message that you got from that strange person, and then you chose to reply to it, and then your significant other sees it and thinks, what is this and who is this? And all the suspicions in their mind start to run. And very soon, an innocent text message that you didn't even know who it came from becomes the end of a relationship that you've invested a lot in. Those types of things happen every day to unsuspecting people. Of course, sometimes the person who sent that text is the one jumping out of the boat just to turn yours over. So what do you do about that? Well, there are a couple of things that you can do. When life comes at you like that, you can learn to swim. And by that I mean, you're in the water now. Your boat has been turned over. It hasn't been rocked. It's been turned over, and you're in the water. Now you've got to choose what you're going to do. Are you going to sink or are you going to swim? See, there are a lot of people when life begins to come at them like that, and those little tiny explosions, and then the exponential effects and the circumstances around your life look horrible. There are a lot of people that just throw their hands up and sink to the bottom and let life win. They just give up. They don't want to fight back at all. Let me tell you something. If you want to live a more excellent life, you've got to choose to fight in circumstances like that. No one's denying that someone else turned your boat over. No one is denying that it was not your fault. If it was, though, take responsibility for that. Because when you take responsibility for it, you take authority for it. When you have responsibility, you have authority. They go together. They're kind of attached to each other. If you take responsibility, you also have authority. When those things happen in life, and you can look back and go, how did I cause that? How did I cause that? Oh, yeah, that's right. That's the moment you've got to take responsibility and go, I know what I did wrong. Never going to do that again. But if you just give up, you throw your hands up and blub, 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 you soak down to the bottom of the lake and you just lay there, it won't be long before life literally is over. Before the financial disaster covers you so clearly that there's nothing left. There's no hope left. Maybe even bankruptcy won't save you. When your relational equity, when the trust that you built up in your relationship is so far gone that nothing you say and nothing you do will repair that relationship. When the job has found out that your productivity level, your commitment to the company, your willingness to job search on the job is more than they can tolerate. In that moment, you've sunk to the bottom. The bubbles are coming up and you're done. That's a choice. But so is swimming. It's a choice to swim. Doggy paddle if you have to. Keep your head above water. Stretch out your arms and kick your feet the minute you get the chance. The minute you're in the water, swim. Get to the shore. Get out of harm's way. Start to take radical action. If you found yourself in that relational position, that everything seems to be going wrong because of something you said, you first need to mark what it is that you said. Put it on that butcher paper. This was a stupid thing to say. This is a bad habit. And then begin the work of getting it out of your life. You also need to do all you can to try to make amends, to try to fix that relationship if it's worth fixing, to try to heal the wound that you've created if it's worth healing, to try to love the person that you've damaged. That you ought to do either way, whether they're quote unquote worth it or not, because it's the right thing for you to learn to love them. When you swim, you take massive action against the problems in your life, whether you created them or someone else did. Let me give you an example that's an extreme example. I just came back from the Congo. And when I was in the Congo, I was in a city called Kinshasa. Kinshasa is 12 million people living in a footprint geographically about the size of Dallas, Texas. That is not a huge geographic area for 12 million people. That's almost as condensed as Manhattan. But with that many people in one space, you have to ask the question, why are they all here? And the real answer is many of them are here because the rest of the country was ravaged with war. And they ran as far as fast as they could. And Kinshasa is kind of the stopping point. It's the city on the Congo River. From here, there's not much further you're going to go. And so they began to amass there. Now, there are people who by choice would still be living in their village, still be raising their animals, still be raising their farm, and be just perfectly content, but for war. They didn't rock their own boat. They didn't make a huge mistake. They didn't do anything wrong. But life around them changed and changed their life in the process. Maybe you found yourself in a position where a job layoff turned your boat over. A death in the family turned your boat over. A cancer diagnosis turned your boat over. All of those major changes in life can rock your boat, can turn it over as well. What do you do about that? You got to sink or swim. Or you can learn to walk on the water. And what do I mean by walk on the water? You got to learn that there are strategies that no one else has ever employed. There are ideas to fix a problem that no one else has ever tried before. Can you imagine how insane Thomas Edison sounded when he said, I'll just make a light bulb. I'll make a light that runs on electricity that you can take anywhere you want to. You won't have to carry fire around or worry about burning down your lab. People probably looked at him and went, you do that, Tommy? Excuse me, right? How about when Bill Gates and others said, I want a personal computer on everybody's desk? When Steve Jobs said, I think I'll create the iPhone. See, he wasn't learning to sink. He wasn't learning to swim and just get along and get by and survive. He stepped up to a whole new level. He began to walk on the water and do what had never been done before. There is nothing stopping you from doing that except the willpower to do it, the willingness to fight, the willingness to say, I'm not going down like this. I will stand up for what I know. I will stand up for what I believe. I will fight against whatever oppression is coming against me. I don't care who rocked my boat. I don't care who turned my boat over. I'm getting up. I'm getting out of this. I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to find a new way. Now, many people know the name Rosa Parks. Part of this getting up and walking on the water means challenging the status quo. No one wanted an iPhone until they got one. Now they stand in line for days when the next one is announced. No one needed electric lights until they got them. Now we can barely live without them in most Western countries. Henry Ford himself said, if I'd given the people what they wanted, we would have faster horses, not cars. There's going to be a change element that has to take place. There's a status quo. There's an expectation. And many people look at Rosa Parks and think, well, Rosa Parks, she challenged the status quo. She refused to move to the back of the bus. She would not give up her seat as she was told to, and she sparked a movement. What a lot of people don't know is the name Claudette Colvin. See, Claudette Colvin was 15 years old. On March 1955, she refused to give up her seat on the bus and was arrested and jailed for violations of segregation laws and disorderly conduct. Later, she was impregnated by an incident she called statutory rape by a much older married man. African-American leaders at the time said, quote, her circumstances would make her a very vulnerable standard bearer. And although her case was taken all the way to the Supreme Court and won, very few people know who she was. Claudette Colvin rocked the boat. 9 months later, on the same bus route, on the same bus stop, Rosa Parks, 42, refused to give up her seat. She was courageous and determined. Rosa Parks' civil disobedience led to the Montgomery bus boycott. Rosa Parks is known as the First Lady of the Civil Rights Movement. Claudette Colvin certainly rocked the boat, but Rosa Parks turned it over. Claudette Colvin was the first one to say, I'm not going to stand for this. But she didn't have all the markings of a leader to rise up and walk on the water. There are a lot of people who had an idea for a mobile phone. Motorola had one long before Apple had a mobile phone. But Motorola's phones today barely keep up with what Apple is capable of. The technology, the ingenuity, the new ideas, the leading the curve. Motorola may have rocked the boat. Apple turned it over. Claudette Colvin rocked the boat when she refused to move to the back of the bus at 15 years old, but she was not in a position at that stage in her life, in the level of maturity, in the level of preparedness, in the level of character, in the level of connections. She was not the one to become the standard bearer for the civil rights movement. 9 months later, on the same bus route, on the same bus in Montgomery, Alabama, another woman, a woman of great character, a woman of great strength and resolve, a woman who is confident, had the same approach. On the same bus, likely with the same driver, said, I'm not moving. And that moment exploded into the civil rights movement in the U.S. That moment in time began to change a lot of ills that had been around for a long time. Now, is it perfect yet? No, far from it. But the process was begun by a catalyst who had had her boat rocked too many times. And she said, I'm tired of the boat rock and I'm going to turn it over. Now, there are things that you can do to be prepared for that. You've got to be willing to challenge the status quo. You've got to be willing to pay the price. Claudette Colvin could not go to the next level after rocking the boat because she wasn't prepared. She wasn't mentally prepared, emotionally prepared, psychologically prepared, financially prepared, socially prepared. She didn't have the connections she needed to pull it off. And the challenge that we see today are young people who want to change the way the world works, but they haven't done the homework necessary. They haven't done the road work, as a boxer would say. If you're going to be in the ring boxing, it's not enough to know how to throw a good punch. It's not enough to know how to take a good punch. You've got to have that 12th round conditioning. You've got to be out there at 4 o'clock in the morning puking on your own shoes because you've run yourself so hard so that no one else could challenge you harder than you've challenged yourself. I promise you, relationally, financially, emotionally, career-wise, education-wise, someone's going to rock your boat. Someone's going to. The question is not if, it's when. And then the immediate question behind it is, what will you do when it happens? What have you done in the meantime to be prepared? Are you ready for that kind of blindside? Have you trained emotionally, mentally, educationally, financially? Do you have money in savings? Have you got enough of an education that a career change wouldn't damage you, wouldn't stop your future movement? Are your relationships solid enough? Have you invested enough time in your children and your significant other and your friends and your co-workers? Have you invested enough time in them that if somebody came to them and said, you won't believe what so-and-so said, they know you well enough to know, you're right, I don't believe it. If you have not done those things to prepare, set a little money aside, paid up your car insurance, put your phone away when you're in the car, worked on those relationships to make sure that they're solid and they're foundationally rugged, then you will find yourself out there in life with someone trying to rock your boat and turn it over. Take some time and prepare. So there are some questions on the screen, questions that go along with this video. Here's the first question. What ways has life rocked your boat? Was it a career loss? Did you lose your job and financially you're having to start all over again? Maybe it was the death of a loved one or a divorce that caused you to look at life and go, it's not going to work like this. I have to do something different. How could you rock the boat yourself rather than waiting for it to happen to you? Maybe you're in that relationship that's just a little bit abusive. You're just a little concerned that if things stay on the track they're on, it's going to get worse and not better. If that's the case, why are you waiting for it to get worse? If you're not willing to work hard enough to fix it, work hard enough to get out of it. If it can't be fixed, get out of it. But don't wait for life to beat you up before you start fighting back. If life starts throwing blows or starts chest bumping or starts raising its voice, it's time to step up to life and go, no, you're not going to talk to me like that. You've got to be willing to stand your ground. And sometimes that means rocking the boat first. If you're seeing the writing on your wall in your career and you realize that that company is about to start laying people off, you should start looking for another job in your off time. You should start building relationships with people that are, excuse me. You should start building relationships with people that are strong enough and long enough that they will last beyond this job. So if all of you get laid off, when one person finds the dream job and has the ability to hire other people or recommend them, that you're in that list. Maybe you are that person that everyone else is going to follow and you want to connect with the best teammates because you don't want to take everybody with you. If the company was that great, if all the employees were that great, they wouldn't be going under. But if there's a chance to move on, maybe you need to rock the boat ahead of time. Start looking for that new job. Start building those new relationships. Start being ahead of that curve. In what ways are you prepared for life events that could drastically change your life? Again, if you have significant others in your life that are a significant part of your financial well-being, do you have life insurance? Do they have life insurance? Do you have medical insurance? Do they have medical insurance? Is your home insured? Is your car insured? Do you have renter's insurance? There are ways to protect and guard yourself when life comes at you, because it will. Tornadoes, nobody plans those. Nobody predicts those. But you could build a storm shelter before they get here. Nobody plans for a hurricane in their life. But when the warning sirens start going off, it's too late to get out of town. You should have left before that. Board up the windows. Pack up what you can't lose at all. And get out of Dodge. Well, what have you already done to prepare yourself for the imminence of disaster? It's coming. It's not a question of if. It's a question of when. But what have you done to prepare yourself so that you can walk past this problem when it does come? You need to know this. How you respond to life events is key. What preparation do you have before a life event hits you? In fact, both Dr. Caroline Leaf and Jack Canfield use this equation. E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals outcome. You can't change the events in your life. We can't control the circumstances of our life, but we have complete choice and decision-making control in the way we respond. I can't stop a tornado. It's how I respond for that. Was I prepared when it happened? And will I lose my mind when it comes? Or am I ready to pack up and move on? Have I got the next level of strategy already laid out? Have I already pre-planned for that imminent disaster? Maybe the imminent disaster isn't a tornado, but it's a financial change. It's a change in the economy. It's a change in a job. Are you pre-planned for any circumstance? Are you prepared for those things? I'm going to close with this story. Many of you know it. If you don't, the movie is out right now, starring Tom Hanks. The movie is about a guy by the name of Sully. Captain Sully was the pilot of an aircraft. Captain Sully's aircraft took off, and within just minutes of its flight, hit a flock of birds. And within seconds, hundreds of passengers on his plane were in peril of their lives. Now, this plane was flying over a major metropolitan city. He could have easily just abandoned ship and mentally given up and went, "We have lost every engine. We can't do anything with this plane. We can't climb, we can't steer, we can't do anything." He could have let it crash right into the city and killed thousands of people on the ground and hundreds of people on the plane. It was fully loaded with jet fuel. It weighed tons, hundreds of thousands of pounds. What do you do? What do you do? See, he found himself, just like those girls, life jumping on his boat. This is imminent. This boat is going to be turned over. He might even be catapulted across the lake. This is a disaster of the highest magnitude. Many people would have panicked. Many people would have completely lost their minds. I've got all these souls that I'm responsible for. I've got thousands of people on the ground under me. I've got 25,000 pounds of fuel on board. What do I do? Captain Sully aimed for the softest thing he could find with the least amount of impact and the highest opportunity for survivability, and he put that plane in the river. It was cold. There was ice already on the river. The weight of the boat, or the weight of the plane, crashed through the ice and began to float on the river. People all around that saw the plane go into the river gathered to the sides. People began a rescue operation, pulling the people out of the plane before they froze to death in the water. Hypothermia only takes minutes. But because of Sully, there were minor injuries, and as far as I know, no deaths as a result of a plane crash caused by bird strikes that took out every engine on the aircraft. Are you that mentally prepared for disasters that are imminent in your life? Are you ready to face life like that? When they asked him, "How did you know what to do?" he said, "I just remembered my training from long before I became a pilot for this company back in my military days." I remember John Maxwell talking about landing on a flight one time, and the pilot was about to land on the ground, and a big wind shear hit him, and the little plane kind of trembled, and just before he touched the ground, he pulled it right back up in the air and made another lap to come down and land again. As they got off the plane, John Maxwell was walking past the pilot at the front door, and he stopped and he said, I noticed that was a bit of a rough landing and we made a second attempt at it. He said, yeah. He said, when did you decide that it was time to put the airplane back in the air? He said, 20 years ago. He said, 20 years ago? I mean, it just happened like 5 minutes ago. He said, no, 20 years ago I knew if I couldn't land it perfectly straight and perfectly smooth, I needed to do it again because I learned to land on aircraft carriers. Wow. Training, preparation, being ready for imminent disaster. When the wind rocked the boat of that little plane, he had an option. Put it on the ground and take a chance that you make it to the end of the runway. Put it on the ground and hope that you can hang on. Or gun it and put it back in the air and make another lap and do this thing again and do it right. You may have relationships hanging in the balance of words that you've said. Fix them. Gun it. Get it back in the air. Swim for all you've got. Find a new solution. Get up and walk on the water. Challenge the status quo. I won't accept this like it is. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do something different. Pour your passion into that avoidance of problems or the head-on collision that's imminently coming with them. Don't let somebody else rock the boat. Rock it yourself. Get a life preserver. Be ready when that challenge comes. Prepare yourself. Mentally, financially, emotionally, relationally. When that challenge comes to you, that challenge should know it's met a formidable foe. That you are ready for the fight. I am J. Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.